This may be my favorite bumper we've ever done with a series. I just want to, that's pretty good. I really like that song we just did. That just blessed me. Thank you, Churchwells and Kevin and for the worship team. That was just a powerful song. A couple of weeks ago, I was looking at, I don't know where I was, actually online somewhere, looking at images, for 2020 and related to that and moving into the new year. And I came across this photo that I wanted to show you. Isn't this remarkable? I want you to check this out because except for the styles of clothing, this could have been taken yesterday. I do like the coat, the long coat there. I think that's pretty cool. It probably takes about 10 minutes to put that on. But even the mask, I want you to see the masks are exactly the same style that most of us wear. They're very similar. The only difference in that photo and one that would have been taken yesterday maybe is that this was taken, I think it was 1919 or 1918. So this is a very old photograph. But I show it to you just as a reminder that we are not the first generation to endure crisis or to go through things together or even a global pandemic. This has happened before. Even in ancient times, there have been all kinds of crazy events all throughout history. And before Jesus comes, there always will be these moments like that. Now, we kind of absorb this sometimes, right? And it's really hard to escape because it's been a long time and a long journey. And as we begin to move out of this, I know some of you have already been vaccinated or you're in the process of that. I looked on the chart for Knox County, and I don't think I'm up until like May or June. So I've got a ways to go. So we're gonna continue to be careful just for my sake, just to take care of me. But we have endured this well, and as we come out of that, I think, well, God, what next? What do you want to do? Why is this relating to us? How does this fit? And what's the relevancy of it? And what do I do next? I think that's a good idea for us. And so what I did is I went back and I just looked through Scripture, particularly because some of the events that are just so played out in story form in the Old Testament and how these events, it would be war, it would be disease, it would be famine, it would be just all of these things that take place, and the prophets would speak into the apathy or the distance that Israel would create with themselves and God, and how many times prophets would speak from the Lord truth into that moment, and it would cause the people to have this awareness that this moment isn't to be wasted. You just don't go through something and then get to the other side of it and go, wow, man, I'm just glad that's done, and now we're going to just kind of get back to normal. Maybe, but some of you have been through life-changing events, and you didn't go back to normal, did you? You went back to a new normal, but things weren't ever the same, and I don't know what it was for you. Probably several things have happened to you in your life that maybe changed the way you live or how you went forward. It could have been a serious illness. It could have been a financial crisis. You might have lost someone that you love, somebody close to you. I am on the board of Grace Fellowship International, and our founder and leader for that for many, many years, Dr. Charles Solomon, passed away recently. Today is his memorial service, and in preparing, in just a little while, I'll drive to Pigeon Forge and thinking about what I would say, and I realized how meeting him and going deeper in my understanding of who Christ is in me and my identity in him, but then with his passing, with the organization, we felt like the top was taken off. We thought, well, where do we go now? What direction do we go? You may feel like that sometimes in your home, in your career, in your personal life. Maybe you've been through a divorce or maybe a breakup, or there could have been something good that happened that changed the way you'll go forward. How do we, as a church, move forward into 2021 and into days to come? What is our new normal going to look like? We are going to find a new rhythm for life together. And that's what this series is about. This is hopefully going to remind us that God is with us, like that song we just sang, in the disorienting, culture-shifting, the situations that we find ourselves in, whether it's a global pandemic like COVID-19, whether it's just a new stage of life, a new season that was maybe thrust upon you or just happened and it was kind of out of your control, just a sudden change that happened. Whatever it is, we're going to see that God has always been with his people, and he is always going to be with his people, and that means you. That means you. Now, there's this passage. The prophet I wanted to start with was a guy named Haggai, and he was a contemporary of several other prophets, and there's this whole passage that just unfolds how God was moving at a specific time in a crisis at this place where they had the choice to go forward in a very powerful and a beautiful way of testimony, or they could just try to get through it and move on. Now, this passage is kind of lengthy. I didn't think you could endure it, whether you're in the room or whether you're online or if you've got kids around you or whatever. So what I'm going to do is just read a couple of verses. I'm just going to and I'll keep it in context, I promise, but just to kind of give you a snapshot of what's happening in this moment. This is verse 2 of, I think it's in chapter 1. It says this: "Thus says the Lord of hosts, these people say the time has not yet come to rebuild the house of the Lord. Then the word of the Lord came by the hand of Haggai the prophet. Is it a time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses while this house lies in ruin? Now, therefore, says the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. You have sown much and harvested little. You eat, but you never have enough. You drink, but you never have your fill. You clothe yourselves, but no one is warm. And he who earns wages does so to put them in a bag with holes." Maybe you feel like that sometimes. Later in this passage, the Lord's going to say several times in several ways, "I am with you," declares the Lord. "I am with you. I'm with you." One verse says, "My spirit remains in your midst." I want you to know that whatever happens to you, whatever you go through personally or that we go through together, his spirit remains in the midst of us. And he says, don't be afraid. Stop being fearful of all the things that might happen to you or that could happen or that have happened and how that's going to affect the ways that you move forward. The big idea for this message today is this, that God calls us to keep him as our highest priority. These sudden life changes offer us a chance. We have an opportunity to realign our value system, who we are and how we live that out, that would better reflect who God is in us and his ways, not just our ways. So the Jews, in this instance, were tasked with rebuilding the temple. This was after the temple had been completely destroyed in 586 BC by the Babylonians. It had been disastrous, and the job at hand was let's rebuild this place. Let's fix this up, and let's get worship going again in the way that God had designed and he was intended. However, the people had another idea. They were very focused on building for themselves these really luxurious homes or repairing things and adding to and just making where they live a little more comfortable instead. I have been several times over the last months, always it seems like I'm going to Home Depot or to Lowe's or to Ace Hardware down the street, and I've asked recently, every time I've gone in, I say, you know what, every time I'm here, this place is jumping. I mean, it's like you folks are always so busy. And they said, yeah, we actually got busier during the pandemic. I said, why is that? And they said, because people are at home and they're looking around and they're noticing, I never fixed that, or that's always been leaking, or this could be better. And I said, everybody's doing these projects on their house. Now, if you're doing that, because I've done some of that, that's not a sin, okay? I'm not trying to condemn you and say, well, why didn't you come over to the church and work instead of doing that? Now, I'm not trying to make that parallel, but I do think that's an interesting kind of a picture of what happened. So you get just a little bit of a taste of where these folks were. So Haggai, the prophet, reminds them, your calling, and this specific word from the Lord was to prioritize worship in life, their worship in the community, and to begin to pull together. They had been through so much, and they had been separated and had just faced all these hardships and these disappointments and these trials and challenges. And God says, now I'm pulling you back together. So here's what I want you to do. Right up front, make your worship life, your church. So he said, pull your hearts back together in unity and then go forward. Make that your priority before you pay attention to all these other things. So God reminded them, as you do that, I'm going to be with you. I am not ever going to leave you. And as they began to work, God said, be strong, which meant to be purposeful, to be intentional, and let this get some momentum. And then God reminds the Jewish people, he said, I was present with you in the past, I'm still with you, and I promise you that my glory is going to be even greater in the days to come than it is now. When you build this temple, and he said, I pledge to you that there's going to be great peace. There's going to be a peace like you've not known in your lifetime. So God calls them. He says, shift your focus and begin to align your values and the way you live that out with who I am and with who I am in the midst of you. Now, I'm going to geek out on you a little bit here about the calendar that these folks were living under, because it's so significant to the way this plays. And we're used to that, right? We live by the calendar. We have these special events, and we've looked forward to 2020 being done, and we think, oh, I can put that behind me and go forward. And then in January, we have all these things to happen, and we think, well, hello, 2021, here we go. And we don't know what's going to happen. Check this out. The dates in Haggai are so agriculturally significant because that was the rhythm of their whole culture. It was all built around that, okay, around agriculture. So the rainy season in the land of Israel usually extends from about October to April. And that's when barley and wheat and all these, just these staples of their diet were harvested at that time. In the spring, it would be harvested. So at the end of summer, which was the 6th month, this is in Haggai chapter 1, farmers were doing just what farmers here do. They're calculating how much grain could I afford to plant so that my family will have enough bread at the end of the harvest. This was an important thing. So they're kind of figuring that out. They're calculating that. Now, 2 months later, by the 24th day of the 9th month, this is in Haggai chapter 2, the rains would begin to fall regularly on the fields and the vineyards and the orchards. And that day was a turning point from this meager harvest they had been experiencing to an abundance. It changed because the Jews began to work not harder on the fields, but on the temple. They began to obey and to follow the Lord. And with that, they positioned themselves for blessing. Now, this is not a you do this and I'll do this, and you don't do that and I won't do that. It was a positioning thing. Just like if it's pouring down rain and you step under a covering or you have an umbrella, you have sheltered yourself from the rain. So hopefully you're not going to get wet. You've put yourself in a place where that's not going to happen. Now, if you step out into the rain and you don't have any protection, you're just going to get wet. It's the same kind of idea where God says you had just in this place where you're so dry spiritually. He said, now step out with me, and I'm just going to shower you with blessings. I'm going to give you this abundance, and you put yourself in that place. It's already there. The provision is already there. The abundance is there, but you're not experiencing it because you're not in the right place. He said in Haggai chapter 2, verse 18 and 19, he said, from this day on, from this day forward, I'm going to bless you. From this day forward, you're going to be blessed. And folks, isn't it true that there's no substitution for God's presence and for his blessing? There's nothing else you can do to try to fill that place or that gap or that empty spot. And you think, well, I really don't have the presence of the Lord in my life, so I'll just fill that up with this or with this or with this. And it just never seems to work. It's always so disappointing when we try to kid ourselves like that. And we think sometimes if we do religious things and we have our own works, our own self-righteousness and all of that, that would plug in that gap, that would fill that up. And then we come away thinking, well, I tried church or I tried religion, and it just didn't seem to work because you were never designed to be like that. And that's just kidding ourselves, and we're not fooling God. We're not fooling him at all. When my son was little, he was probably, 3 or 4 years old, and it was quiet in the house, which was that was a red light went off in my mind immediately because it's never quiet in our house with him at that age. And so I began to look around for him, and I thought, wow, he's being awfully quiet. So I went into the laundry room. This is when we lived on Bishop's Bridge in Farmington, neighbors with the Fethys and some others there. And there he stood in the laundry room. He had on a little blue T-shirt with a pocket, and he had on little shorts. Both hands were full of M&M candies. I mean, all he could hold. They're falling out between his fingers. His little blue pocket was stuffed with M&Ms. And if he moved, they fall out of his pocket. His little pockets in his shorts were full of M&Ms. We had told him, don't go in there because we kept this 1 pound bag. Our pantry wasn't big enough for all the food, so we kept some of it in the laundry room. And there he stood, and his little cheeks were just puffed out like a chipmunk. I mean, just full of M&Ms. And I said, hey, buddy. He goes, I said, what are you doing? I said, did you get into the M&Ms? Did you get those M&Ms? He went, I thought, you're not fooling me. I said, okay, it's obvious that's what he's done. But how many times do children think they can trick parents, right? How many times do kids think, well, you don't know what I'm doing. And we're all thinking, been there, done that. We've done all these things, and so we kind of know. Maybe you're an employer, and you know that about people you work with. You think, I know, because I've been there. When I was in high school, I was in a drafting class, and the big thing in my high school, and don't imitate this part, okay? But it was getting out of class. That was a big thing. It was a kind of a braggy thing, and it was just like anytime you could skip class, and you'd talk about it later, yeah, I skipped class. So I was in drafting class, and Mr. Dewberry, who was he left the room, and so I was going to leave the class by the window. So I climbed out the window. It's on the second story, and I realized as I'm hanging there, I'm thinking, wow, that's a long drop. And my plan was to let go, like in the movies, people drop out of windows and nothing ever seems to happen to them. But when I'm hanging there, I'm thinking, that is a long way down, and I'm going to break my leg. And so I just hung there trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And my original plan was to run into the woods and kind of hide there and meet friends and leave campus. Now, I was suspended my senior year of high school because I had 43 unexcused absences. Okay, so you don't want to get suspended, which to me was a silly punishment. I remember being called into the principal's office, and they said, well, we know this, we're going to do this, and so we're going to suspend you. And I'm like, no, not that, please. Don't do that to me. It was kind of a ridiculous punishment, I thought at the time. But I'm hanging there, and I can't decide what to do. And my friends in the class, Mr. Dewberry comes back into the room, and everybody just thinks it's funny, and everybody gets tickled, and they're laughing. And finally, I think Mr. Dewberry looked over to the window, and he saw 2 hands, holding on. So he walks over and he goes, yeah, I don't see Mr. Riley. He always called everybody by their last name. He goes, has anyone seen Mr. Riley? And he's standing right there, and I'm thinking, don't anybody tell? But he can see, he can see, and he's watching this whole thing. So finally he said, somebody help the boy back in the class. So they pull me back in, and off to the principal's office I go again. I think I'm fooling him. And we think sometimes that we're that way with God, whether it's intentional or kind of accidental. We think, well, maybe God won't see this and he won't notice that. And it's the same as with a child living in the belief everything's okay. And the parent knows that's not the case. The teacher knows that's not the case. The employer knows that's not the case. The same happened with God and the Jews, because they're failing to continue to rebuild the temple. And that was their mission. That's what they're supposed to be doing. But they were doing something else. And folks, that's what happens to us. When we deny our own struggles and we fail to allow God to help us to face our need of Him in our lives, then everything goes off track. Have you ever moved into a new house? Or maybe you helped somebody move into a new home and you're bringing the furniture in. Isn't that one of the most fun jobs ever? When your friend calls and says, hey, pizza's on me. Can you come help me all day? You think, no, I don't. Do you have like light, easy IKEA furniture? Or do you have, oh no, we have stuff we inherited from Meemaw and it's big, and heavy stuff. So the furniture, you get it in, but it just doesn't fit right. It's not like your old apartment or your old house. And you think, well, this couch, it just doesn't go there. We don't know where to put this, and we don't know how to arrange. So it took time. Remember? It took time to configure it. Maybe you even thought, this is not going to work. We have this really tall piece of furniture. I don't know what it's called, an armoire maybe, and it matches all the bedroom furniture. But it's so tall, and it's built in one piece, we could not get it up the stairs. We tried every way. I have front stairs and we have these back stairs. We tried both. Again and again, we had the movers to try it. We tried it. We thought, can we take it apart? And you couldn't without destroying it. We could not get it up. So now it's downstairs in the piano room. We just left it there, and it just sort of blends in. So that's you understand. You've probably been in a place like that. I think we get to a place like that sometimes. And what happens is when we begin a new season, whether it's because of a pandemic, or maybe it's something more personal. Maybe you got married. Maybe you got engaged. Maybe you had a child. Maybe you had a baby, or you adopted someone into your home, or you got a new job. It could be the death of someone that you love. Whatever happened, we're forced to move on. And we have to reconfigure the old in our life with the new in our life. We've had to do that in a lot of different ways. Maybe you've had to do that recently. It's unfamiliar. It's unsettling. And it comes with it at this time when we can begin to find, God, will you show me familiar things? Will you show me things that my heart can lean into and that I'm comfortable with and that I feel safe or that I feel secure with? Everything changed? That's a new normal, and that's where we are. We're that way as individuals and maybe as families and certainly as a church. We learn to be comfortable in our new situation because we know that God's with us. Now, when we do this usually, almost always requires from ourselves and with those whom we closely share life with. Maybe it's a roommate or parents or a child or a spouse. We need to give those folks an immense amount of grace and patience because they may be going through things or processing that in a different way, on a different level than you are. So we have to be really gracious with each other during that time. Now, God is more gracious than you can possibly imagine. We tend to project our natural expectations and our ideas, our thoughts about who God is onto Him. This happened to me from a very early age all the way up. My first idea of God, I was told, well, God is a judge. And my name means God is my judge. And my mother, how she knew that, I have no idea, but she sort of exploited it. And she would say, well, I may not catch you, I may never see you, may get away with something, but God is watching you, and God is your judge. And I just walked around most of my childhood thinking, God's mad at me, he doesn't like me, he's trying to catch me. So can I be sneaky enough, or how can I get away? Well, because God is watching you, I was just scared of God. And as I grow up and I find out, that's not who he is at all. That's not who God is at all. That's, his love is just so incredible. And I don't know what your idea of God is. And I don't know what you've brought all the way from throughout your life up to this moment with you, with that thought of who he is. So instead, Scripture, instead of pushing through that tendency to just let the Bible surprise us into what God is really like, sometimes we just stay in our lane. In Isaiah chapter 55, verse 8, the Lord declares, my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways. Sometimes when Christians are going through difficulties or things they don't understand, and you thought, well, I prayed about this, and I did the next right thing that I thought I should do, but it just didn't work that way, or I didn't see that coming. So here's what we say, well, but his ways are not our ways. And we sort of put this mystical vibe on God, like, yeah, he's really... And I know that's true. I get it. And there have been times in my life where I thought, oh my goodness, I didn't see that coming. Or I had no idea God was going to work that way. I know that happens. But when we quote that passage in that way, we're actually taking it out of context. It means something quite different. If you go home this afternoon or tonight and you read that whole passage, you're going to see what it's really about is God's compassionate heart. It's Hebrew poetry. It communicates this message again and again in these layers that God doesn't merely just accept us. No, he sweeps us up into his arms again, and he takes us deeper into his heart. The natural inclination of our minds, of our ways, is reciprocity. It's this idea we think of payback. We like justice. We want things imbalanced. We push chaos away from us. That's why this year has been so disturbing. And in my personality, I want to know the plan. I want to know. And we just have to make that up as we go. And we have to pay attention and use all the information. And you have felt that. Some of you students thought, well, are we going to have class this week in person? Are we going to be on Zoom? Are we not going to do that? Some of you with your work and with church, we've thought, I don't like this uncertainty. I don't like it. We want order. And we want that way, that in a sense of our legality about things too. We are much more lawish than we like to admit, than we maybe pretend or even aware of the fact that we are. We have this, we've lost the capacity to apprehend the heart of God. And we have this tiny, scratched up view of how he loves us. His ways, even his thoughts, which are, by the way, perpetually full of grace, full of love being extended to you. They are, the writer says, they're as high as the heavens are above the earth. Now, that's just a Hebrew way to create spatial infinity. What he's saying is, I can't even describe. You don't even know how big his love is, how deep his grace really is. You have this small idea, and you still think, oh, yeah, but there's got to be some kind of justice, I'm still going to be punished for that. Well, don't you know that God already punished your sin That's what the cross is. That's what happened in Jesus. He took your punishment. That's not poetry. That's a reality. That's literal. That's true. And it would just make your head explode when you really begin to believe, oh, so you're not going to punish me for my sin because you've already punished Jesus. I'm never going to be punished for my sins? No. You may be disciplined. You may need to be repositioned because you're under this place where you can't receive God's blessings. And God says, you're not going to move out into the shower of my blessings, so I'm going to give you a nudge. With me, sometimes it's a kick or a shove. I'm sorry I got to do this, but I've got to get you in a place where you can know how much I love you again. And you're depending on either a sin or your own self-righteousness to try to fill that gap. But he's never going to punish you for your sin if you're in Christ, because he already did that. Or as Paul said, as Hebrews says, then Jesus would have died for nothing if you could have saved yourself. If you could have paid your own price, your own penalty. His ways, his thoughts are so far above ours. The only other verse I could find that was similar to that was in Psalm 103, verse 11. David said it. He said, as high as the heavens are above the earth, so is his steadfast love. Now, that's a word we looked at last year. It's called hesed in the Hebrew, and it means loving kindness. We don't even have an English word for it. It's just difficult to translate because it's so big and deep and rich. But he loves you like that. He loves you beyond what you see on your mental horizon, what you can picture, what you can think about with your imagination. And he wants you to come back. He wants you to come back to him in your heart. He wants you to find him again. And I know this is all distracting. And maybe you have found comfort, or maybe you have found security or blessing in 100 other places. And maybe the enemy has tried to use a pandemic or a personal experience that you've had to pull you away in your experience from the heart of God. And God just says the same thing to you as he said to people in crisis thousands of years ago. He said, just follow me. Just follow me. For those folks, he said, build the temple. Get back to work. And from this day forward, I'm going to bless you. You have repositioned yourself into a place of blessing. Followers of Jesus are to look to him to guide us through tricky times like this. When things don't look familiar, when they don't feel safe, he wants to be near us. He wants to call us his own. But here we are, often we're hiding. We're in the laundry room thinking M&Ms are going to give us what we need. We're hanging out of a classroom thinking if I can just escape this and get out there, then things will be better. God says, you're not going to find what you're looking for in any of those things. So stop hiding. Stop rejecting his help. If we let these things, though, these unexpected changes work in the way God intends to, it can reconfigure our values to be centered around him. And you're going to immediately begin to sense something different. I have no idea what your plans are for this year. You know, what you hope to accomplish, what you think or wish you would see God do in your life. But I know this. If you will come back, if you will put yourself back under his grace, you're going to begin to see and sense that nearness just of his blessing in all kinds of ways you never expected. So I'm going to ask you to do something just a little bit unusual. I'm going to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes. If you're at home and you're watching, this may feel awkward, but if you just want to bow your head there in your kitchen or your bedroom or the living room, wherever you are, I'm just going to ask you a question. Have you allowed the events of last year to maybe push you a little bit? Or maybe some things that just happened in your life, and you've begun to rely either on your own self-righteousness, your own religious self, or maybe some sin that seemed to give you some comfort or was soothing or calming in some way. But you know, that's empty. And today, you'd like to step back in to God's blessing. Whether he's disciplining you or whether he's not. Whether you're still in this place where you feel okay. But your spirit, Jesus in you, tells you this is going nowhere. Let's build the temple. Let him build his temple in you. Would you just slip your hand up and put it back down? Okay. I can't see you if you're on your line. And you probably can't see in this room, but there are hands going up all over the place. God, we make ourselves available to you. We reposition ourselves under your grace. And our eyes are on you. We can't wait to see what you're going to do next. What you're going to do in and through our lives. Build your temple in us now, in Jesus' name.